Hi everyone, welcome back to Trees and Turtles. My name is Imogen and in today's video I'm sharing my experience of living with anxiety. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that, give this video a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram and let's get started. Yeah, let's get started. So I've had anxiety for, well, probably around 10 years now. I think I probably developed it at quite a young age, maybe around 11 or 12. And I'm 22 now, so I've lived with anxiety throughout my teenage years and it's got worse, it's got better. It's been a roller coaster. But the first thing I wanted to share with you was the sort of main symptoms of anxiety, because sometimes, a lot of the time actually, I didn't realise that a lot of the things I was experiencing were symptoms of a medical condition, and that stopped me from getting help for a long time because I thought it was normal to feel this terrible, and then I realised it was not. So if you recognise any or multiple of these symptoms in yourself, then I strongly recommend that you get some help. The first thing I'm going to talk about is physical symptoms. So if you're regularly experiencing like an increased heart rate, muscle tension. I used to hold a lot of tension in my shoulders. I went to this like massage therapist one time and she was like massaging my shoulders and she was like, these are the most tense shoulders I have ever seen. And I was like, oh, that's an achievement, but it really was not an achievement. Okay, so I held tension in my jaw, and my dentist also commented like, you have extremely well developed jaw muscles, and I was like, thanks, I guess. But anyway, the point is, if you've got a lot of muscle tension, especially in the neck, shoulders, back, then you might have anxiety. And also if you sweat a lot, if you experience a lot of sweating, even in like non-strenuous situations, like you're not going for a run, for example, you might just be sitting in front of your computer and you're like sweating, and it's not a weird temperature or anything, you're just sweating. Also fatigue, feeling tired or drained due to like the sort of physical and emotional toll of anxiety can actually be a real thing, and it's something I have personally experienced and continue to experience. Right, the next thing I want to talk about is the emotional and cognitive aspects of anxiety. So excessive worry, it is the main symptom that I can think of, is like constant and uncontrollable worrying about like various aspects of life, and you're often anticipating like negative outcomes, negative results. So fear and apprehension is also a part of this, so feeling a sense of impending doom or danger without a clear reason, like you're just sitting like, I don't know, in front of the TV and you're like, something terrible is going to happen and you're literally watching a rom-com, okay? So those kinds of things. Overthinking, so analysing situations excessively, sometimes leading to indecisiveness. You're like, oh, well, I could do this or I could do this, but what if this happens and what if this happens? And then you don't make a decision and everything is just so confusing and stressful. You might also have difficulty concentrating, so struggling to focus or concentrate on tasks because you're overthinking too much, like your mind is too full, you can't slow down and focus for even 1 second. And irrational fears, so developing fears that can seem irrational or out of proportion to the situation. I haven't experienced this so much, but some people like report developing extreme phobias. I did have a lot of OCD symptoms as well when I was a teenager, although those have since subsided and I don't have them anymore. But some people develop a lot of irrational fears, so if you're scared of something but you're not sure why, that could easily be a symptom of anxiety. There's also a lot of social and interpersonal challenges, so you might experience social avoidance, where you're avoiding social situations or activities because you're worried people are going to judge you or they're going to think badly of you. That's something I definitely still do. You might be isolating yourself, so withdrawing from friends, family, social activities. You might have difficulty expressing your feelings, so you might find it difficult to articulate like your emotions or share your personal experiences with others. I found it really difficult to open up to my therapist to begin with. Like, my anxiety was so bad that I would bring to the first few sessions, and actually throughout the first block of sessions, I brought a big stack of my journals, okay? There's a reason behind this. So throughout my teenage years, journaling was one thing that made me feel safe, and I brought my journals ostensibly so I could share their contents, but in reality what happened during our sessions was I put the journals in like a big pile on my lap, sort of creating like a little wall of safety, perceived safety between me and the therapist, because I was really sort of scared to open up. And I noticed I was doing this, and my therapist noticed I was doing this, and she was like, why do you always have a wall of journals on your lap? And I was like, oh, it's so I can share the stuff in them. And she's like, you never share the stuff in them. And then I started sharing the stuff in them, but then gradually, as we did more and more sessions, I took the journals off my lap, and then eventually I stopped bringing them, because all the stuff that was in my journals was also in my head, and I could talk about it that way, but I realised that I was building a sort of physical and emotional wall. So that's a sort of very interesting example from my own like therapy experience. But another symptom can be a super big fear of criticism. So being overly sensitive to criticism or rejection, leading to like heightened anxiety in social and stressful situations. So that can also happen. I also experience fear of criticism. You might also have physical symptoms like, I mean, I know I've talked a little bit about physical symptoms earlier. I'm just looking at my video notes. I should have structured this a little bit better. But you can, like, not sleep for a while. Like, I've been lying awake. And I remember the day after I finished my A-levels, I just did not sleep at all. Like, I hardly slept. I think I slept for a couple of hours the night after my A-levels. And that should have been, like, some of the best sleep of my life. And I was just lying there, like, sort of stressed because I didn't know what it was like to not have exams. And my body was just experiencing so much anxiety. Then obviously you can also have gastrointestinal issues because stress can affect your digestion. You can have a lot of headaches. I used to experience so many headaches. I was almost constantly having a headache. You can also have compromised immune systems. So if you're really, really stressed chronically, then this can weaken your immune system. You can also be constantly alert, on high alert all the time, and you can have panic attacks. Now, panic attacks were a big, big feature of my anxiety as a teenager, and I can hardly describe what a panic attack is like if you've never experienced one, but it's almost like, I described it in my journal as a teenager as being like when you don't feel like you're you don't feel like you're real. And I later realised that there's a word for this. The word for this is derealisation, and I was also dissociating. So there'd be I felt sort of grey and fuzzy and like I wasn't in my body, and this would happen whenever I started to panic, and it was really bad. And it got to the point where I was just in therapy and I was just like crying because I was like, I just do not want to experience this ever again. And the therapist was like, oh, it's okay because we're going to work out a plan to stop you having panic attacks. But and we did, and they mostly stopped. But I did have a panic attack last year, which was so bad that I actually passed out, and I had to go to hospital, and that story's in another video. But the point is, panic attacks are very real and they can be very serious. So do not dismiss your symptoms, okay? Alright, the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is coping mechanisms, because these can be really good or they can be really terrible. And the first coping mechanism that I want to talk about is avoidance. So you can engage in behaviours that avoid situations that trigger anxiety. Now, in small doses this is good because you're sort of helping yourself function in your day-to-day life, but if you become avoidant to the point where you are not functioning at all, then that is a problem, okay? Because you're avoiding like normal stuff, like you're avoiding, I don't know, washing your clothes, or you're avoiding doing an assignment, okay? So when it starts to affect you to that extent, then it's time to get help. Self-medication can be a bad thing because it can lead to substance abuse. If you are using medications, then they should be prescribed, okay? I'm just putting that out there. Compulsive behaviours, anxiety and OCD are often linked. So developing rituals or repetitive behaviours can relieve anxiety temporarily, but it's just not a good idea long term because it can just lead to yet more mental struggles. And having personally experienced those symptoms as well, yeah, you're going to need help for that as well. Okay, so the next section is my tips to handle anxiety. Go to therapy. I mentioned this again in my depression video, but go to therapy. Okay, my therapist saved my life, genuinely. She absolutely saved my life. And I did cognitive behavioural therapy, but not every kind of therapy is suitable for every kind of person, so experiment, find the therapy and the therapist that works best for you. Go to the doctor. It never hurts to make the doctor aware that you are suffering from anxiety. When I went to hospital, the doctors were all really, really, like, they were lovely with me. Like, I genuinely thought I'm making a big fuss about nothing. And they were all like, no, you're not. This is genuinely, like, we are here to help you. So I promise they want to help you, okay? Yeah, NHS waiting lists are not a joke, but get yourself in the system. Tell your doctor you have anxiety. I promise it will help. Get medicated and stay medicated. I am on medication. I'll put it in the description because it's a long name, but basically it's a beta blocker, and what it does is slow the production of adrenaline in my brain. So my brain produces too much adrenaline, which produces all the physical symptoms of anxiety, and then I get worried because the physical and the mental are very much linked. So when I take my medication, that like slows down or blocks the production of adrenaline for a certain amount of time, and that brings me down to normal levels, so I can actually just calm down and function more normally. Do all the self-care and journaling and mindfulness that you can. Self-care genuinely does help, okay? Talk to someone who gets it. Talk to someone who's also got anxiety. Talk to a therapist, okay? Talk to me in the comments. I am very happy to talk to you about anxiety, and I would love to hear your experiences. Also find the music which calms you. As much as everything I've already mentioned saved my life, my favourite band also saved my life. I have the band name tattooed on my arm because of how much they helped me, but like their music is so calming. If you haven't watched my videos before, the band name is Oh Wonder, and I'll leave a link in the description as well, but they do sort of like really dreamy alt pop music, and yeah, for a long time one of their songs was the only thing that could like snap me out of a panic attack, so I owe a lot of my sort of recovery and stabilisation to their music. Speaking of panic attacks, I have a couple of quick tips for dealing with a panic attack. So suck on an ice cube or snap an elastic band. Like if you wear an elastic band on your wrist, not too tight, but you wear an elastic band and you snap it. These were 2 tips that my therapist recommended to me, because when I used to have panic attacks, I used to like dig my nails into my hand because I wanted to like bring myself back into feeling like I was real, but that was like hurting me, and she was like, no, don't do that. So she recommended those 2 tips to me, and they actually are really effective. Also, something I discovered is when you're having a panic attack, sit down and put your head lower, and this can stop you from feeling so lightheaded, because when you are feeling lightheaded, there's not a lot of blood in your brain, so when you put down your head, like you sort of lean over, then the blood will move back to your brain, and you'll feel more clear-headed, if that makes sense. So that's just something I've discovered. Obviously, go easy on yourself, but that's something that can be really helpful. Slightly controversial tip, but use anxiety to fuel your success. This is a productivity channel. I actually wrote the script for this video on a day when I was extremely anxious and also extremely productive. I wrote loads of scripts that day, so channeling that anxious energy into something productive can be really constructive for you and just help you to feel something positive from something negative. But you also need to get help, okay? You can't just use it for productivity like I did for many years. Don't make that mistake. And finally, know your triggers and get out of those situations, or learn not to be scared of them. It's a combination of therapy and sort of exposure to stuff that you know isn't scary, but you actually need to convince yourself isn't scary. And also, if you're in a toxic situation, that absolutely can cause your anxiety. So yeah, get out of any toxic situation that you possibly can, and please, please, please get professional help, because I am not a doctor. I am just someone who has anxiety, and this is my experience living with it. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that. Give this video a big thumbs up, follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, bye!